Wow, your appearance and your age left a very influential person completely shocked, and now he cannot understand why you are still running through his mind. He expected to notice you for a moment and then continue with his day. He expected attraction to be simple. He expected to look at you, appreciate what he saw, and move on. But something about you disturbed that entire expectation. The moment he really noticed you, something changed inside him. It was not only your face. It was not only your eyes. It was not only the way you looked. It was the combination of your appearance, your age, your confidence, and the strange calmness you carried with you. He could not immediately understand you. And that is what made you unforgettable. You may not even realize how strongly that first impression affected him. You were simply being yourself. You were not trying to impress him. You were not trying to attract his attention. You were not constantly checking whether he was watching. You were simply living in your own world, comfortable enough with yourself that his presence did not completely change your behavior. And that surprised him. Because this is someone who is probably used to people reacting when they realize who he is. People may become nervous around him. People may suddenly become more attentive. Some may try to impress him. Some may become overly agreeable. Others may become interested in what he can offer. He has probably learned to recognize these reactions very quickly. But you were different. You seemed aware of him. But you did not seem consumed by him. And there is a huge difference between those two things. That difference made him look at you again. Then he noticed your age. And that created another layer of confusion. Because your appearance did not match the assumption he had made in his mind. Maybe you looked younger than he expected. Maybe you carried yourself with a maturity that made you seem older than your appearance suggested. Maybe there was simply something about you that refused to fit into the category he had created. Whatever it was, his first impression of you became uncertain, and once that happened, curiosity began. He started asking himself questions. How old is she really? Did I misunderstand? Why does she look like that? Why does she carry herself like that? What has she experienced? Why does she seem so comfortable in her own space? And then the questions became more personal. Who is she when nobody is watching? What is her life really like? What makes her laugh? What does she care about? What kind of person is she behind that calm exterior? He had originally noticed your appearance. Now he wanted to understand your personality. That is where everything began changing, because physical attraction can be temporary. Curiosity has a different kind of power. When someone becomes curious about you, their mind begins creating reasons to return to the memory. That is exactly what happened. He continued with his day. He focused on his responsibilities. He spoke with other people. He handled whatever was happening around him. But then, without warning, you appeared in his thoughts. Maybe he remembered your eyes. Maybe he remembered something you said. Maybe he remembered the way you smiled. Maybe he remembered the exact moment you looked away. Perhaps he remembered the way you were listening to someone else and how completely unaware you seemed of the effect you were having on him. These details should have disappeared, but they did not. And that started bothering him, because now he was asking himself a question he did not expect to ask. Why am I still thinking about her? At first, he tried to give himself a simple answer. Maybe it was just because you looked different. Maybe it was because your age confused him. Maybe the interaction was unusual. Maybe he simply found you attractive. That explanation seemed reasonable. For a while. Then he remembered you again, and again, and again. He could be doing something completely unrelated and suddenly remember your face. He could be having an ordinary conversation and suddenly think about your voice. He could be surrounded by people and still remember the way you looked at him. That was when he realized this was no longer just about appearance. Something about your presence had stayed with him. And the more he tried to understand it, the more questions appeared. There was something particularly confusing about your eyes. Not because there was anything unusual about them physically. It was because he could not easily read what was happening behind them. He is probably someone who considers himself good at reading people. He may have spent years learning how people behave. He knows when someone is impressed. He knows when someone is nervous. He knows when someone wants something. He knows when someone is pretending. But with you, he could not get the certainty he wanted. Your eyes gave him something, but never enough. You might hold his gaze for a moment, then naturally look away. You might smile, then continue with your conversation. You might speak warmly, then behave exactly the same way with someone else. You gave him just enough to wonder, but not enough to know, and that uncertainty began pulling him deeper. He started comparing you with other people, not because he wanted to reduce you to a comparison. He was simply trying to understand what made you different. He thought about people he normally found attractive, people who were confident, people who were interesting, people who were impressive, people who knew how to get his attention. And then he thought about you. Something was different. He could not identify one single quality. It was the combination. Your appearance caught his eye. Your age confused his expectations. Your calmness made him curious. Your independence made your attention feel valuable. And your lack of effort made the whole thing feel more genuine. You were not trying to create an impression. You simply created one by being yourself. That is what he could not explain. At some point, curiosity became more than observation. He wanted information. Not enough to make his interest obvious, not enough for other people to start asking questions, just enough to understand you better. He wanted to know your age. But he did not want to ask you directly because that might reveal how much attention he had already been paying. So he listened. He noticed details. He paid attention when your name came up. He noticed references to your life. He listened when other people talked about you. And eventually, he learned something that surprised him. Your actual age still did not match the image he had formed. If you were older than he assumed, then he could not understand how youthful and fresh your appearance seemed. If you were younger than he assumed, then your composure made him question how much life experience you already carried. Either way, he had been wrong, and that fascinated him. Because people remember the moments when their first judgment fails. You became one of those moments for him. But there was something even more important than your age. Your composure. You did not appear intimidated. You did not appear desperate to impress him. You did not seem overly excited by his presence. But you were not cold either. You were simply balanced. And that made you difficult to categorize. He could not place you into the usual categories he used when reading people. You were not chasing him. You were not avoiding him. You were not trying to win his approval. You were simply comfortable. And that comfort made him wonder what had happened in your life to make you this secure in yourself. He began thinking about your past. Had you experienced enough disappointment that you no longer needed validation? Had life taught you not to be impressed by appearances? Had you already learned something that he was still learning? Or were you simply naturally confident? He did not know, and he wanted to find out. That was the moment when his curiosity became personal. He stopped asking only why you looked the way you did. He started asking who you really were. And then another thought entered his mind. What do you think of me? That question may have affected him more than anything else, because he is probably used to knowing what people think about him. He may be used to being admired. He may be used to people respecting his position. He may be used to people wanting access to his world. But with you, he could not be certain. You seemed to notice him. But he could not tell whether you were impressed. And that uncertainty made your opinion more valuable. He did not simply want your attention. He wanted genuine attention. He wanted to know whether you would still be interested in him if his influence disappeared. Would you still enjoy talking to him if nobody else knew who he was? Would you still find him interesting if his reputation was removed from the situation? Would you still look at him the same way if he were simply another person standing in front of you? Those questions began touching something deeper inside him, because physical attraction would have been easier. Physical attraction requires very little explanation. But emotional curiosity is different. It asks questions about compatibility. It asks questions about connection. It asks questions about possibility. And eventually, he began wondering whether the two of you could actually fit together. That thought may have surprised him, because this was not supposed to go that far. He had only noticed you. Then he became curious. Then he became distracted. Then he started thinking about another opportunity to speak with you. Then he began wondering what would happen if he pursued the connection. Suddenly, his mind was somewhere he had not planned to go. He imagined having a quiet conversation with you. Not in front of other people. Not in an environment where his position mattered. Just the two of you. He wondered what you would say, what you would laugh about, whether you would challenge his opinions, whether you would become softer once you felt comfortable, whether you would ask him questions that other people were too afraid to ask. He even imagined something very ordinary, simply sitting beside you and talking. Nothing dramatic, nothing glamorous. Nothing connected to his influence, just being around you. And then he caught himself. Because he realized his mind had moved beyond attraction. He was imagining access to the private version of you. The version that other people may not see. And that was a different kind of interest. He tried to pull himself back. He told himself to be reasonable. He reminded himself that he did not actually know you well enough to make assumptions. But the thought had already entered his mind. And once a possibility enters the mind, it can be difficult to completely remove it. Then something else happened. He started becoming more aware of other people noticing you. Maybe someone else approached you. Maybe someone stayed in conversation with you longer than necessary. Maybe someone complimented you. Maybe he simply noticed the way another person looked at you. And immediately, he recognized the expression, because it was probably similar to the expression he had been giving you. That realization created an unexpected reaction. He did not like it. He knew he had no claim over you. He had not told you how he felt. He had barely admitted the feeling to himself. So why did it bother him to see someone else interested? Because somewhere along the way, you had become important enough for him to care. That realization can be uncomfortable, especially for someone who likes control. He may have told himself that he could wait, he could observe, he could take his time, he could understand the situation before making a move. But now he realized something. While he was analyzing everything, someone else could simply act. Someone else could approach you. Someone else could make you laugh. Someone else could discover what he was still trying to understand. And suddenly, waiting did not feel quite as safe. That did not mean he was going to rush toward you. It meant he started considering his next move more seriously. He wanted to know how you felt, not your polite reaction, not whether you respected him, not whether you were comfortable speaking with him. He wanted to know whether something changed when the attention became personal. Did your eyes react differently? Did your voice become warmer? Did you become more aware of him when he moved closer? Did you enjoy his attention? Or were you simply being naturally kind? He watched. He listened. He looked for subtle clues. And still, you did not give him an easy answer. Sometimes you seemed interested. Then you behaved normally again. Sometimes your eye contact lasted a little longer. Then you looked away as if nothing had happened. Sometimes your voice seemed warmer. Then he heard you speaking with someone else in exactly the same warm tone. You continued to leave him uncertain. And strangely, that uncertainty kept him interested. Eventually, he decided to test the connection carefully. Nothing inappropriate, nothing aggressive, nothing that would put you in an uncomfortable position. Just a slightly more personal conversation. Perhaps he asked about your plans. Perhaps he asked your opinion about something. Perhaps he mentioned an observation that revealed he had been paying more attention than you realized. And then he watched your reaction. You did not dramatically reveal your feelings. But you also did not close the door. You answered. You stayed engaged. Maybe you smiled. Maybe there was a small pause. Maybe you looked directly at him for a moment longer than necessary. Whatever happened, it gave him enough hope to continue. And that mattered, because now he had something he did not have before. A reason to believe the door might not be closed. He still did not know what you wanted, but he knew you were not pushing him away. And that changed his thinking. He no longer wanted to remain at a distance forever. He wanted to create an opening. A real opportunity to know you. Not another accidental encounter. Not another moment of watching you from across a room. Something intentional. Something simple. Perhaps another conversation. Perhaps a reason to stay in contact. Perhaps an invitation for coffee. Perhaps an opportunity to spend time together without the distractions of everyone else. He does not need to make it dramatic. In fact, he probably prefers that it stays subtle. Because he wants your genuine response. If he uses his influence to create pressure, then he will never know whether you actually wanted him. And that is not what he wants. He wants something real, something that exists, because both people choose it. That is why his next step may be smaller than you expect. It may not look like some huge declaration. It may simply be more consistent attention, more conversation, more opportunities to be around you, more questions, more effort to understand your life. He may remember details. He may find reasons to check in. He may become more deliberate about being where you are. And if he feels that you are receptive, he may eventually become more direct. But there is something important you should understand. The reason he is taking his time is not necessarily a lack of interest. It may be the opposite. Sometimes people move slowly when something matters more than they expected. If he only wanted a moment of attraction, he could act quickly. But if he is thinking about consequences, compatibility, timing, and your genuine feelings, then he is considering something more serious. He is not simply asking whether he wants you. He is asking whether this could actually work. That is a much bigger question. There may be differences between your lives. There may be differences in age. There may be differences in social circles. There may be responsibilities that make everything more complicated. There may be people who would have opinions, and he knows that. But strangely, thinking about those complications has not made his interest disappear. Instead, it has made you feel more real. You are no longer simply someone attractive that he happened to notice. You are someone he is beginning to imagine as part of his actual life. And that is why this situation feels different. At first, he was surprised by your appearance. Then he was confused by your age. Then he became fascinated by your personality. Then he started noticing your reactions. Then he became curious about your feelings. Then he started wondering about the possibility of something more. And now he is trying to decide whether he should stop observing and actually move closer. That is the progression. But there is one more thing he may not fully understand yet. You affected him because you did not behave like someone who needed his approval. You did not need him to validate your beauty. You did not need him to confirm your worth. You did not need him to make you feel important. And because of that, any attention you gave him felt genuine. That is rare. When someone is surrounded by people who want something, authentic attention becomes difficult to recognize. Perhaps that is why your presence stood out. You did not seem to want access to his world. You seemed to already have your own. You had your own thoughts, your own life, your own interests, your own identity, and he could feel that. That independence may have been more attractive to him than anything else. Because someone who does not need you can choose you freely, and that makes their choice meaningful. So now, the question inside his mind has changed. At the beginning, he was asking, why am I still thinking about her? Now he may be asking something much more serious. What would I regret if I never found out who she really is? That question changes everything, because it means he is no longer simply satisfying curiosity. He is thinking about possibility. Could this become something? Could the two of you actually fit? Could you understand each other? Could he feel comfortable enough to show you the part of himself that few people see? Could you look beyond the influence and connect with the person? He does not know, and neither should you treat this as a guarantee. A possibility is not a promise. A feeling is not a commitment. An attraction is not automatically a relationship. But the fact that his thoughts have reached this stage tells you something about the impact you made. You were not forgettable. You were not just another face. You were not simply another person he met and immediately forgot. Something about you stayed, and sometimes that is more powerful than any dramatic confession. Because real interest does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it appears through attention, through remembering, through curiosity, through the desire to understand, through the subtle changes in someone's behavior when you enter a room. And perhaps that is what you have been noticing. Maybe you have sensed that his energy changes around you. Maybe you have noticed that he looks at you differently. Maybe you have caught him remembering something you said. Maybe you have noticed that he becomes more attentive when you speak. Maybe you have wondered whether you were imagining it. Perhaps you were not. But the important thing is not to obsess over every small signal. Let actions eventually provide the answer. If he truly wants to know you, he will create opportunities. If he truly values the connection, he will make an effort. If he genuinely wants something real, he will eventually move beyond observation. You do not need to chase him. You do not need to force anything. You do not need to become someone else. The version of you that caught his attention was already enough. Your natural presence was enough. Your confidence was enough. Your calmness was enough. Your independence was enough. Your authenticity was enough. You did not have to perform. And that may be the most beautiful part of the entire story. Someone who is accustomed to influence was affected by someone who did not appear to need it. Someone who is used to being noticed found himself noticing. Someone who is used to understanding people found himself confused. Someone who may usually control where his attention goes found his attention repeatedly returning to you. And that is why he cannot simply forget the encounter. Your appearance caught him first. Your age challenged his assumptions. Your personality created curiosity. Your confidence created respect. Your independence created fascination. And your uncertainty created emotional tension. But ultimately, it was not any single physical feature that stayed with him. It was the feeling he experienced when he was around you. He felt more alert, more curious, more aware, perhaps even slightly vulnerable. And when someone makes a powerful person feel something they cannot immediately control, that person tends to remember them. So if you are wondering what really shocked him, it was not simply your beauty. It was the contradiction. You looked one way, but carried yourself another way. Your appearance suggested one story, while your energy suggested another. Your age gave him one expectation, while your presence gave him another. And instead of giving him a simple answer, you gave him a mystery. That mystery became curiosity. The curiosity became attention. The attention became emotional investment. And now he is left wondering where this could possibly lead. You may not know what happens next. Neither does he. But perhaps that is exactly why this moment is so interesting. Because neither of you has the complete answer yet. There is still something to discover. There is still a conversation that has not happened. There are still questions that have not been asked. There are still feelings that have not been spoken. And sometimes the most meaningful connections begin exactly there. Not with certainty, but with curiosity. Not with a grand declaration. But with one person realizing they cannot stop thinking about another. So continue being yourself. Do not change your behavior simply because someone influential has noticed you. Do not chase his attention. Do not try to become more mysterious. Do not try to prove that you are worthy. Your value existed before he ever saw you. Your confidence existed before he ever noticed it. Your beauty existed before he ever appreciated it. And your life existed before his attention entered the picture. If he wants to become part of that life, he will have to approach it with sincerity. He will have to meet you as an equal. He will have to show you who he is beyond the image. And perhaps that is exactly what he wants. Because somewhere along the way, he stopped wanting to impress you with what he has. He started wanting to know whether you would appreciate who he is. That is a very different kind of desire. And it may be the reason he is still thinking about you. He thought he was simply looking at an attractive person. Instead, he encountered someone who challenged his expectations. He thought he could understand you immediately. Instead, you made him curious. He thought your age would give him an easy explanation. Instead, it created more questions. He thought his influence would shape the interaction. Instead, your independence made him question whether his influence mattered at all. And perhaps the biggest surprise of all is this. You were never trying to make an impression. You were simply being yourself. And somehow, that was enough to leave a powerful impression on him. So let him wonder. Let him think. Let him figure out what he wants. Let him decide whether he is willing to take a real step. You do not need to do the work for him. You do not need to chase clarity. You do not need to force a connection. If something genuine is meant to develop, it will require effort from both sides. For now, remember this. The person who truly notices your value will not only admire how you look, they will become curious about your mind. They will respect your independence. They will remember your words. They will pay attention to your feelings. And they will eventually want to know the real person behind the first impression. That is what seems to be happening here. Your appearance may have been the first thing that caught his eye. Your age may have been the first thing that confused him. But your presence is what stayed in his mind. And sometimes that is the strongest kind of attraction there is. Not the kind that disappears after the first glance. The kind that makes someone close their eyes later that night and remember your face. The kind that makes them wonder what you were thinking. The kind that makes them question whether you noticed them too. The kind that makes them imagine another conversation, another meeting, another opportunity, and eventually another possibility. That is why he cannot completely move on from the thought of you. He expected to notice you. He did not expect to remember you. He expected attraction. He did not expect curiosity. He expected to understand you quickly. He did not expect to question his own assumptions. And he certainly did not expect to wonder whether you might become someone important in his life. But now that thought exists, and once it exists, he cannot simply pretend it was never there. So the next chapter is not about chasing. It is about watching what happens naturally. If he wants to know you, he will find a way. If he wants another conversation, he will create one. If he wants to move closer, his actions will eventually reveal it. And when that happens, you will not need to wonder anymore. Until then, continue living your life. Continue carrying yourself with that same calm confidence. Continue giving your attention only where it feels genuine. Because the greatest thing you did was not capture his attention. You stayed yourself after you captured it. And that is what he may remember most. He did not meet someone who desperately wanted to be noticed. He met someone who was comfortable enough to be themselves, whether anyone noticed or not. And perhaps that is exactly why you became so difficult for him to forget.